Thanks for joining us for these last 10 steps. You can find the show notes for this podcast on our website, 10stepsfurther.com. If you'd like to join us for another journey, or if you know someone else who's on this walk, subscribe to our podcast at 10 Steps Further on iTunes, or simply search 10 Steps Further on your podcast app. If you'd like to be part of the conversation with a question or a comment or a criticism or even a wisecrack, join our Facebook group by simply searching 10 Steps Further. And if you're ever in San Diego, come visit us at Canyon Springs Church. We'd love to meet you. Welcome back to 10 Steps Further, another exciting episode that we are going to talk about.
You said it like that because it's in the afternoon.
You
want to make sure that we
got to get some energy. And people came in a little burdened today. We do have Leslie Hyde, the voice of all women, with us.
Yeah.
So thanks for being here with us.
Yeah. Okay, I'll start off like this.
Okay.
When people find out that you are a Christian, do you sense that maybe you're going to get a little different treatment? Like, what is your expected treatment when you let people in that don't know you, that this is your belief system?
Ooh. There could be some judgment, or there could be a different level of expectation. I mean, most people, if they find out about me, they're like, oh, you're the children's director. Okay. Like, that's your job? And like, oh, so do you have something for my kid? Like, can you make my kid, like, turn out to be a nice person?
Can you make your own kid turn out to be a nice person, Leslie?
Jury's out.
That was the burden that she was carrying when she walked in today.
Oh, man.
And we would let you tell that story, except, again, Matt would be, Matt is generally thrown under the bus, her husband, when we do these.
Yeah, no.
Do you feel that, Jonathan?
I always think it's funny, like the how people censor themselves when they know that you're a Christian. They're they'll say something. Sorry, Jonathan. It's always like I'm not. I didn't say anything. I didn't judge you, man. Just
so funny.
Yeah, I mean, I've even had like been in a group, like a small group of people, and somebody's like, oh, dude, this is such a good movie. Yeah, I love that movie. And then they look at me like, yeah, you won't want to watch that.
You won't like it.
Yeah, you won't like that movie.
Well, I'll get that from my wife. I'll go, wow, this is a really great movie. She said, don't tell them to watch that movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Or my daughter Sterling, she loves music, and I like listening to music with her. She's always, like, whenever I'm in the car, whoever's with me is my DJ.
Right.
And they're playing me their stuff, and she'll always say, but Dad, they're swearing in this.
Right.
Like, I'm going to be shocked.
Yeah.
She's 20, she's going to, it's okay.
Well, in music now, like if you go on Spotify and you get like the hits right now, top 50 songs, and then you turn off explicit lyrics, you can listen to like 5 of them.
Oh, funny.
Right.
It's like, because there's no radio anymore. People don't listen to the radio, so there's no standard.
One time, Lincoln came in the room and he was like, Mom, I asked Alexa to play this song, but she said the explicit filter was on. Or something I don't even know what song it was. It wasn't. I think it was Old Town Road, maybe.
Really?
I actually think it was Old Town Road.
Okay, wow.
And he said, Alexa said she can't play it because of the explicit filter. He's like, what's that?
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it's just. I mean, I don't know what to do with it. It's like it's just an uncensored season.
Do you have your own personal explicit filter?
No, I mean,
I don't see you swearing.
So some of the stuff that I'll listen to, like I'll listen to stuff and it'll have swearing in it, and then like when I'm working out or something, I'll be listening to something. But some of these songs are just like constant. Just the worst of the worst. Like the chorus will just go in and it's just like repeating like the worst.
Yeah, you're right.
The worst movie you've ever seen as far as dropping bombs in these songs.
Right.
And I'm
Bad
like,
Boys.
And like I was,
Bad Boys. The first 2 minutes of Bad Boys, I couldn't make it.
Yeah. So, but because I'm like listening the other day, I'm listening to this song and it starts off with this verse and it's a good verse, and then it goes into the chorus and I'm like, I told my phone, never play this song again. I will remember that you do not like this song.
Oh, that's great that your phone plays that role for you. I don't know. Like when I'm introduced as a pastor, there are just people that will treat me differently. For one, Bill Walton Remember? He's an all-time NBA player, top 50 players, whatever. I don't know. Do you know who Bill Walton
Well,
is,
I
Leslie?
only know who he is because I think his kids played high school basketball in this. They were around my year.
Yeah.
So I think I like remember in high school going to high school basketball games and people being like, "That's I don't even know his name."
Luke Walton,
yeah,
probably.
yeah.
Yeah, so for my birthday a couple years ago, me and Jonathan and a couple of our friends hooked up this meal at Bill Walton's house. And it took Bill about a half hour to get past the fact that I was Pastor Jack.
Yeah, that's so funny.
Or I'll go golfing. I used to golf a bunch, and they put you in a foursome. You don't know any of those people.
Right.
And I try to delay telling them as long as possible. So I went the
Yeah.
first 9 holes, and it was F this and S that, and just boom, 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 boom. And finally, on the 10th hole, I said, "So what do you do for a living?" A very different experience, the back 9 than the front 9.
Yeah. I try to keep people from cussing for a living.
Yeah, I know,
That's what they
but-
think it would
I
say.
know, I know.
Exactly.
But
That's
things they
number
wanna-
one on
yeah.
my hit list. When you
Right.
come in, I'm just going to confront you about you swearing.
Yeah.
I give you an idea of what people think of you. Mm-hmm. Stephen Colbert. If this is going to be a Christian nation, that doesn't help the poor. Either we have to pretend that Jesus was just as selfish as we are, or we've got to acknowledge that he commanded us to love the poor and serve the needy without condition, and then admit we just don't want to do it.
He's got a point. He's got a point.
He does.
Yeah.
Woody Allen. If Jesus came back and saw what was being done in his name, he'd never stop throwing up. I think
I don't know about that point.
I know. I feel like I do feel like there are times when people very selectively look at
What Jesus
what
said.
Jesus
Yeah.
or what not what he said, but what Christians are doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Because there would be no feed the homeless groups or no, going around the world to take care of people's needs. There just really aren't any atheist feed the homeless groups. They just don't exist.
Right.
Right? And what's done in
Right.
Jesus' name is really shockingly amazing. But there are other things that
Yeah.
people do in Jesus' name that I probably don't really like very much.
Right. Yeah.
You want another one? This is
Yeah.
I'll read it to you, then I'll tell you who. I think it might shock you.
Okay.
Christians are hard to tolerate. I don't know how Jesus does it. That's Bono.
Yeah. Okay, I could see that.
Bono, who definitely has some spiritual vibe to him,
Yeah.
right? Okay, this one, I don't know. Have you ever noticed how most evil people are big, hypocritical Christians? They think it's the perfect cover. That's Lyle Lovett. I don't know if I certainly don't believe all of those people.
Right.
But there are a lot of people who feel that way about us.
Right.
So our point today is how do you make what's the difference between making a point and making a difference? Mm-hmm. And how can you be somebody that actually stands up for truth, but you'll still make a difference? And the space that we got into before we even got started was, I think there's a time when you need to make a point,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think usually there's a point behind the difference, right? I mean, there's
Right.
there's some kind of a truth,
Right?
some kind of a statement that you're trying to fix or engage with. So there's something that you've bought into that, serving the poor. There's like, hey, the poor they need help. That's a point.
Right.
But
Yep.
and
Right.
so in the communication, if you're trying to rally people to a cause, you're going to communicate your point for the purpose of making a difference.
But that's not the point that people think that we're trying to make.
right.
The point that people think that we're trying to make is, don't be gay, right? Or
Don't
what?
cuss.
I mean, what are the other points that they think that people think that we're trying to make? Don't swear, right?
Right.
Obviously,
Right.
Don't drink.
Yeah.
Don't have affairs.
Yeah, right. We're list keepers,
Right.
And we've got track of this.
Right.
What I get most of the time is, oh, I'm so sorry I didn't show up at church on Sunday. Like that's what I'm keeping track of,
Right.
right?
You are kind of keeping track of it.
And the answer right now is nobody. Nobody's coming to church on Sunday.
My list is empty.
Okay, should we? Yeah, you have something you want to say on that, Leslie?
No, I mean, when we were talking ahead of time, I just said that I really think that the difference between making a point and making a difference is all in the context. And I think that if you're in the context of being in like an intimate relationship with somebody, whether that's like a friendship, a sibling, a child, a husband or a wife, if you're in that context and you are saying like, I firmly believe this, and this is why, and this is right or this is wrong, or if you're making a statement like that, that you're making a point, it's going to be received differently if you have an intimate relationship with somebody, and then you can, continue to talk about it, versus the context of saying like, Christians are anti this or pro this, and just saying it to a mass of people without any of the intent behind it or any of the closeness or intimacy behind it, that somebody could see like, oh, I know you, I know your heart, I care about you, and I agree with your, whatever it is. And so I can understand, like, tell me more about that, or I can still understand where you come from. Mm-hmm. And I just think that sometimes, like, somebody or Christians, like a Christian or a group of Christians, really strongly believe something and they have a point behind it. They might have biblical truth behind it, but if it's just given in such a way that's thrown out to the masses, it can feel very judgmental. And so the context in which that you're driving home your point really impacts whether or not that point is going to make a difference or not.
Yeah. Okay. So verses read at every wedding, they're all about love. But it starts out like this: if I speak in tongues of men or angels, but don't have love, I'm a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy, and I can fathom all mysteries and knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains but don't have love, I'm nothing. Paul's basically saying, look, if that's all you got, if you're a Bible answer man, or you're this Indiana Jones faith warrior, but you don't love people, you're nothing.
Right.
The word here is the word Odin. You're just Odin. You're nothing. You have no usefulness to God. If you do all of these things and yet you don't do them with the purpose of loving the people around you. Like, that's the point to your point.
Right.
Right? My point to you, like if I was talking to you about your language, which I don't know that I've ever done that to really anybody, maybe my kids, but if I ever said that to you, it would be, well, you know what? If you do use that kind of language, then people will make assumptions about you that probably aren't even true.
Right.
So there are occasions where you just need to be conscientious of that, because you'll be judged better based on the language that you use. And it's that statement is not a, hey, you're a jerk, or I don't like you if you use this language or whatever. There's a point to that. Now, I can't make that to everybody, and I don't.
Right.
I let my daughter play music that has swearing in it. Right?
Right.
Well, I think so. Something that I remember that was like a big point in our house growing up, that my dad sat me down and had conversations with me, is like, we don't want you to have sex before you're married. And that was like, I knew exactly where he stood, and he was very firm in the way that why he believed that and the way that he believed it. And when I had a very serious boyfriend in high school, he sat us both down and talked about it. And he was very clear on his point, whether or not I liked it or understood it or agree with it. He was very clear on it. As an adult, I can understand that his point of doing that, and even as he would tell me, is like, if you choose to engage in anything before you find your husband, whether it's like holding hands or kissing or, the next level or having sex, any of that, you're giving something to somebody that you can't give to your husband as the first time. And so that makes a difference in what your relationship is with your husband someday. And so but again, it's like the context, I feel like, because if somebody who, that I didn't have a close relationship with or didn't hold to that same value, like, I can't say that my dad, didn't do that. But if somebody else didn't hold to that same value, but was telling me that you shouldn't do this, and this is the reason you shouldn't do it, and you should wait, and all of this, it's not necessarily going to make a difference in my life or change the way that I'm doing something or help me to have like a great, healthy relationship in a marriage someday, because it didn't have the same context of caring about me and my heart and understanding like what that takes away from my husband someday. And so I think that there's so many more opportunities to like make a point to people that you're very intimately close to. And there's a lot more opportunities to make a difference if you're sharing your heart with other people and kind of like the why behind it when you're in other relationships that are maybe not like to your kids or to your siblings or to your in-laws or, you know, a more intimate relationship. And I just feel like making a point does work to make a difference someday, but I think people who go out and are like, I strongly believe this and this is the point that I'm making, it just comes off as feeling like judgmental to people if they're like, whoa, well, I've never heard that, and where's this coming from? And that's like a new philosophy. I've never had that. Like, that's not how I was raised, or that's not what I always learned growing up, or I didn't have education. I just think that if you're just going out there to make the point, it's not that your point is wrong, but it's not going to be well received because oftentimes it feels judgmental if it's different from what the person has had ahead of time.
Yeah, I think on the other side, I would wrestle with it of like I would say every advancement of every agenda has been mostly because somebody and maybe enough people just made a point. Whether it's the proclamation of the gospel or the proclamation of any of the other crazy that's out there,
right.
It's done because people stepped up and said it, and enough people stepped up and said it, and I do think that there's a danger in telling Christian people to not step up and say it, like not just gospel, but like truth, just general truth, like. That there might be people who would listen to this podcast and hear what you just said, and they don't know you at all, and yet at the same time they're like, oh, that makes sense. I've never really heard it. So they just heard what your dad said to you secondhand to them, and that may change somebody's life because you said it in a public place. And the same happens when people say things that are completely kind of out there. Just propagating racism or propagating some crazy idea, and other people will just sit there and they'll like spin it in their head and they'll be like, oh, maybe that's true. Maybe I am the superior race, and so
right. So in the 60s, the biggest issue that black people had with the church was that they said nothing.
Yeah.
Right. And that just kept propagating racism throughout our culture. So there has to be a point in which you stand up for what you do believe and right.
And oftentimes, this is something that I said before we turned on the mics, is oftentimes the person you're trying to convince is not the person you're talking to. Like, especially as things are being debated and discussed in public. I mean, we live in a time like social media time where like winning the argument might have 1,000 eyes on it. And that person that you're arguing with, they're not changing anything. They're just the pawn in the game that's going to keep going back and forth with you. And I do feel like it's difficult because it's incredibly draining. And I think oftentimes we lose sight of the fact that the person that we're trying to convince is not the person we're debating with. It's everybody else. Like if somebody comes into my house and in front of my family begins to share some thoughts that I think are destructive and wrong, I'm going to debate them, argue with them, but yet here's the thing: I don't care that their view changes. I care that my kids hear a different perspective than what this. So there's a lot of stuff that I'll see, and I will have discussion. I'll like pause it, stuff on social media. I'll pause it and have a conversation with my kids who aren't even watching it.
I think, generally speaking, this is the way relationships work. Like if I'm in a conversation with my wife and my goal is to win, then I will lose.
Right.
But if my motivation is love, then I will consider how I say what I say. It won't change. It won't change truth, but I will communicate. And I'll try to understand.
Right.
I'll hear the other side.
Right.
I find that when there are people that want to know more about this relationship with God that I have, the closer I am, the more they ask me questions about those kinds of things.
Right.
And we are able to have open, honest discussions about it.
Right.
But like you said, I don't think it's enough. I can't remember. I think it was Augustine who said, something.
Preach always.
Yeah.
If necessary, use words.
Yeah. And I always heard that and thought, it's necessary.
Right.
Use words, right?
Use your words, Augustine.
Yeah,
Come on, buddy.
right. But I'm not going to believe you if I see, like, if you're having a conversation with me about something that you think is really important that I know,
Right.
and you're rude to the waitress, I'm not going to listen to you because in your heart, I'm not sensing that you have that this thing has made a difference in your life to the point where you love the people around you.
Right. Yeah. I think of Jesus saying about the religious people of his day. He said, do what they say, don't do what they do.
Yeah.
He was bothered by their hypocrisy. He was bothered by the fact that they walked around trying to look as spiritual as they could. And yet he's like, everybody knew that they were corrupt. Everybody.
Right.
It's the same as today. Like, everybody knows, like, you're faking it. Everybody knows. But yet he didn't say just avoid them altogether. He's like, well, the stuff they're saying is actually good.
Mm-hmm.
This is the stuff they're doing is that's a problem. And so, like, do what they do, or do what they say, not what they do.
And again, he never won any of those guys over.
No, yeah, maybe one or two, but it's like,
right. Yeah, they weren't listening. Okay, the verse continues. If I give all I possess to the poor, give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but don't have love, I gain nothing. I mean, even if you just give a bunch of money,
right?
I don't really want to preach on that verse because we do want people to give. But man, that's just kind of the way, right? Like I rewrote these verses. You ready?
Yeah.
This isn't as good as the Bible, but I do it anyway. If I raise perfect children, maintain the perfect schedule, and maintain my ideal weight, but have not love, I am nothing more than a leaf blower at 6:30 on Saturday morning. If I drive an electric car, wear Toms, decline any coffee that isn't fair trade, but don't have love, I'm nothing more than an obnoxious ringtone in a crowded movie theater. If I take my family to the Holy Land and leave New Testaments at every room along the way, but don't have love, I'm nothing more than a middle school girls' playlist.
That's harsh, man. That's harsh.
Right? How is it that our truth is, the truth is truth. One of the things that I believe is I don't necessarily have to try to fight for all the truth that everybody believes because the truth will win out.
Right.
That what I believe is actual truth. And so at the end of the day, if you believe it or don't believe it, I'm fine.
Right.
Because I know that life will prove it out.
Right.
And there are times when I really feel like I need to stand up for that. But there is also something that's happening in my heart that I think gets a little bit more traction. Mm-hmm. Paves the way for me to have those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think too that, it's that whole idea of like giving all you have to the poor. I've wrestled with that passage. You give all you have to the poor. You let your body be burned. So they're basically, they were burning people at the stake, literally. And so, but you don't have love. And in my mind, I'm like, what are they doing it for then? They gave everything they had to the poor. And it's interesting because we live in a time right now that people give abundantly and sacrificially to be seen.
Yeah.
Like they're not, like, it looks like they're doing it for the cause of the person that they're helping, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But the reality is who's the hero of the story in the end of the day? They are. Mm-hmm. And that's the motivation. The motivation has nothing to do with the person that they're claiming to love. Now, so Jesus actually told us a whole thing about it. He said, hey, if you're going to give, don't even let your left hand know that your right hand is giving. Mm. If you're going to pray for people, the Pharisees will do it with a bell on the crowded street corner. But when you do it in the closet.
Right.
Like this, because there's this tendency of just like, we want to look like we're doing it for love. And seemingly what Jesus is saying is like, when you really do it for love, nobody will actually even know you did it. Which is crazy. Like, I don't know what to do with all that because I've always wrestled with that. But because there's that you can give to a need and actually not care about the need.
Yeah.
And I feel like since this happened, and I feel like the making a point thing, this like dumb thing keeps popping in my head of like when Christians really wanted like the Starbucks coffee cups to have something on it. Do you remember when that all
Oh
happened?
yeah, right.
And so that's like what I'm thinking every time we're talking about this point and making this point. I'm like, it's just a bunch of hypocrites who are like trying to get it right, but clearly don't know the way to do it all the time. So
Right.
sometimes I feel like these big, bold movements and statements just end up being really stupid.
Right.
Like, I don't know, like that just, it just makes other Christians look like you're putting so much time and effort into that. Like,
Yeah.
there's of course a lot of million good things that are making a point, like
Sure.
going on missions and going to feed homeless, and there's like good actions that's taken, but there's also things that happen, like a bunch of people from churches going and protesting without masks and like making a big statement in that sense that may or may not be public, like health, from a health perspective, responsible, but they're making their point. And what is their point then? Like, it gets lost because they just want to be so loud and making their point.
Right.
I don't know. I just feel like sometimes when we're so big on trying to make the point, the difference doesn't happen because
Well, it's. I was talking to my brother the other day about, and this is not going to be political, but it's going to sound like that's where I'm going. About
Everything's
people
politicized now.
people tearing down statues.
Okay.
And because that's a big thing right now, depending on when you're watching this, I don't know if it's going to still be a big thing, but tearing down statues of, historical figures that are controversial or whatever. So they're tearing down statues. And my brother made a cool point to me. He said, there was never supposed to be an image set up that we bowed down to. That God uniquely put his image on us. There wasn't supposed to be some other image that we like defend, that we set up, that we bow to. That was all through Israel's history, all through Bible history, from the beginning of man that we see in the book till forever, is we see God in conflict with people bowing down to images other than, like, he was the God that nobody saw, and the only thing that had his image was the people he made. And so we're supposed to be the image.
Right. The problem wasn't that they made a cow, like this golden cow, and they're bowing down to the cow like it was God. That
Right.
wasn't the problem. The cow was supposed to represent this God.
Right.
That they
Right.
knew, that they had this personal relationship with.
Right.
And so they made a cow to help remind them to pray to God.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know why a cow or whatever. It seems
Right.
like if I'm going to choose, I can choose something better than the cow.
Right.
But any representation diminishes who God is.
Right.
And so I had some people years ago say, well, why don't you challenge everybody to watch The Passion of the Christ? Well, and I think it's a good movie. I don't want to say it's not a good movie, whatever. Maybe it's really super helpful.
Right.
But it wasn't Jesus. And I'm
Right.
watching the movie and go, that's not Jesus.
That's Jim Caviezel.
That's Jim Caviezel. and
Mel Gibson.
any image
Yeah.
diminishes the actual
Yeah.
who God is.
Yeah.
That's what it was. I mean, even you make a statue of Jesus or a crucifix or a painting in the Louvre that has a picture of Jesus, they all don't match up.
Right.
Right.
Well, and it's the same, like you're talking about, putting some kind of Christian something on a Starbucks cup. Right, like that would be a big push, and like I think In-N-Out has verses. I don't know
They
if they still
do,
do.
I think,
they
yeah.
have like
Bottom of the
verses
cup.
like kind of hidden on their cups somewhere. But really, like, I love this Jesus. Hey, is it lawful to pay taxes to the Roman government? And Jesus says, well, show me the coin, and they show him the coin, and he's like, who's on the coin? The Roman emperor is on the coin. All right, so give to the Roman emperor what has his image on it, and give to God what has his image on it. So the answer is not, can we get more religious cups and coins?
Right.
The answer is, like, as we're focusing on all that, the answer is, are you reflecting him?
Right.
That's the answer.
And
Like,
what is the number one thing he wants us to reflect? What is that? That we love other
Love,
people.
yes, yeah,
Right?
yeah.
It's not that
Racking
God's
my
not.
brain right there.
I was
I
like
know,
gonna
like-
say it, but I'm like, that seems really
Yeah,
obvious that that's what you want.
It's obvious that God's
what I was gonna say.
that God is a God of truth, right?
Yes.
But he says this over and over. Look, you can do all these things, you can be all these things, but if you don't lead with love, and when somebody asked Jesus, what's the most important commandment? What was it?
love your neighbor.
Well, love God,
the Lord,
love God,
love your
and
neighbor.
love your neighbor. Those It's just, if I got to take out of the 10, do these 2.
Right.
So my issue with Christians sometimes is that in our desire to make a point, we don't lead with this relationship,
Right.
this love relationship that God really wants.
Yeah.
Because what he wants is to love you so much that you're going to want to change some of those behaviors because you realize they're hurting other people and yourself.
Right.
Not because, I do it because I said so. Like we were talking about some parenting issues. Do you want to talk about your the fight that you had with Josiah yesterday and
about making a point versus So I had done some laundry, and then I went out to grab something from it was still in the dryer, and the dryer was going, and my laundry was not where it was left, and so I asked my son, where or whose laundry's in the dryer, and he says it's mine. I said, so here's the thing, man. When you take clean clothes out of the dryer, there's 2 places it shouldn't go. One place is on top of the dirty clothes that's waiting to be washed, and the other place is on the floor of the garage.
which your
is
laundry
where he
was
put
in both places.
Yeah, that's where he put my stuff, and he was clearly irritated by the tone I was taking, and then I said to him, like couple minutes later, I said, I know you're irritated by me saying this, but it's the best chance I got of it not happening next time. And so it was like just I wanted him to feel the tension of it. And then I wrestled throughout the day of, not that much, but in the moment I'm like, was I a little harsh with him? And then as soon as I walked in the door later after work, I come in and he instantly wants to show me a car on his phone that he thinks is cool. And even that was kind of like okay, good. I didn't rupture the relationship, but I made a point to get a result in the future. But we have that, as Leslie said, we have that context of relationship where I knew, like, if somebody was visiting my house, did the same thing, I wouldn't have said it the same way. If that makes sense. Yeah. So, I tend to be a little tough with my kid sometimes. He's 18. He can handle it.
Yeah, I do believe that we're all in all these concentric circles, and the closer you get into these circles, the more I can tell you the truth. Like I have these frank conversations with my son-in-law about money because he's asking me questions about cars and stuff like that. I don't have those conversations with everybody.
Yeah.
But the closer you get to the inside,
Right.
the more I'm willing to reveal some of those truth things that can make a big difference.
Yeah.
But if you're on the outer circle, then what I want to lead with is, hey, I value you.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not, hey, clean up, stop swearing, don't smoke anymore, and you can follow me.
Yeah. I just feel like if you are all about making the point and you're not about caring for the people that are around you, your point is never going to be made. It's always going to be lost on people. And I've said this before, but I feel like most of the time I am not really bold in like who I am or what I believe or why we do things the way we do or things that I'm like really like non-negotiable in our house as a family. But those conversations come up sometimes because people will say like, oh, it just really seems like you and Matt like each other. Like, why does that look different? Or it feels like you're like have some good ways to communicate with your kids when they're being little, not great kids, whatever it comes up to be. Or I just think that like who you are and the way that you love the people around you is going to be more of a testament to the things that you are like firm in believing than just being the person who wants to like say things to make a point.
When you have a good marriage, you don't have to go around giving unsolicited marriage advice.
Yeah.
Right.
Right? Like you don't just have to be like, here's what you need to be doing. Like you don't have to. People would just be like, wait, what are you doing?
There's like
right.
Everywhere you go, there's confirmational bias. So like if people really love you and who you are as a person, like people in your congregation, they like think that you're fantastic and they think that your kids are smart and they're all successful and your marriage is great and you go on mission trips.
That, though. Oh, my kids are so successful.
But
Except
I'm
for his
just saying,
daughter
like,
that listens to foul language.
Yeah,
Right.
except for that part. They're going to not take your advice on that. But if people see those things in you and they like them and they see that generally you're family is about love, then they want to come to find out more from you. It's
Sure.
not because you're some pastor that stands up there and says
Right.
like, do this and this and this and this.
Yeah.
So help me unpack this, okay? So I'm part of this pastors group. There are 7 of my best friends in the world, and 4 of them aren't pastors anymore. That's what will happen if 2 pastors groups. It will burn you out over time. But the ones that are, when in the middle of COVID, we had all this race conversation.
Right.
And so they wanted to stand up and say something that was appropriate for their context to the people that they're speaking to about the importance of people people who are black and different than us and what have you. I have no doubt that they did it in a manner of love and care.
Okay.
And each one of them got destroyed by people in their church.
Oh, yeah.
Some people stood up and said they agreed. Other people said, no, you're wrong, and here's why you're wrong. Here's the difference between me and them. I made Chad speak on that Sunday.
Chad got the backlash.
And Chad did take the backlash,
Right.
It just happened to be the Sunday that he was, it was a youth Sunday. I wasn't trying to get rid of it because I really would have liked to have had that conversation.
Right.
But I will tell you that there will be times when you have to stand up for truth. And how interesting, too, that in that particular case, all of these people were claimed to be Christian people.
Right. Yeah, and you're going to have differences of opinion. I think one of the things that I have said in conversations as I'm wrestling through the season of time that we're in is looking and saying, I try to project into the future and say, what side of history was I on? You know, like what did I do? Because we can look backwards to the civil rights movement and we can say, oh, I would have stood, here, and we can look back at anything, and we think we know, right? I mean, it's like here's one that I've been thinking about, and this is a little less of the specific race issue that we have. Is like you go back 80 years. My grandfather was 10 years old, and that's just in context to how recent 80 years was, because my grandfather is 90 right now. And there was a city that you could have lived in, and there's a conspiracy theory that your neighbor down the street whose family just moved didn't actually move. Soldiers came to their house, dragged them out to a camp, and gassed them. That was the theory. And I mean, that just sounds crazy. No way did that happen. And here's the thing. What if I'm in that neighborhood 80 years ago, what did I do? What was my voice? Because most people's voice was, nah, it's crazy.
Silence.
Yeah, most people just kind of let it happen. So it's when I look at the times that we're in right now, it's like, are we just going to sit by, and are we going to add our voice to the conversation? And I think that we can add our voice to the conversation even if we're wrong, if we're in a discussion, if we're in a dialogue where we're just like, okay, teach me what I don't know. And we're open to seeing things from a different perspective. But almost all the voices out there are not open to hearing what they don't know. They're more proclaiming, making their point.
Since when do I have to agree with all my friends?
Right.
Right? Like when was that ever a case? I mean, what percentage of the time do we agree on things, Jonathan?
Right.
I mean, we disagree on stuff all the time.
Right.
The reason why it works is I love you, you love me. We get each other. We're willing to listen to each other.
Right.
If you take the love element out, then it's just angry words thrown back and forth.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that there is definitely, I'm grateful for people who are like bold in being able to speak up. I think to your point that is important. And I think that there's some people like me who are like, I'm going to do this in an intimate way. I'm going to share this. But I think that for big change and movement to happen, you're right. Like there has to be people who are bold enough to speak out. And probably because of my own worry or whatever, those people are going to get a lot more backlash than me. Like the people that I am more like intimately connected to, there's a chance that on a smaller scale you could have like some more ripple effects or bigger impact in some ways because you know them more intimately. But on a larger global impact, like on a social media or a big thing like that, you have the potential to impact thousands. So you're right in that making a big point is valid and important sometimes too. And we have lots of platforms that people can do that now.
Right. Well, and I would say, like, I helped coach basketball a long time ago. We haven't talked about basketball yet.
I know. Yeah,
Let's shift gears. No, but I helped coach basketball a few years back, and for a high school varsity team, and the head coach was like, he was he was just kind of mean. He was so emotional and so passionate for winning. And so he'd have these moments where he'd like pull a kid out for doing something wrong, sit down. And then he'd say loud enough for everybody to hear, I hate my team right now. And he'd say it to me. And I learned pretty quick that I had a different role than that. Like my job wasn't to echo him. My job was to pick them back up.
Right.
Because he was, and I feel like that's the thing is like, we need the bold, loud. I think Jesus had 12 guys for a reason. You had your Peter.
Right.
But you also had your John. I mean, John seemed kind of more of a softie, and Peter was very much like willing to say, if he thought it, he said it. And sometimes he was right and sometimes he was wrong. And then you had like a John, or then you had some of these guys that we don't even know anything that they did.
Right.
But they were part of the team. And so I think that there's a dad role, there's a mom role, there's a cousin role, there's a all of us are going kind of in the same direction, trying to make a point, but some we do need the person who's just going to say the wrong thing and say it loudly and boldly, and then we get to dialogue with people.
Right.
So
generally speaking, you and I, we're all impacted in how we grow up and what we do, and most of the time it's not a post, and it's not a message. Right. And it's not a sports star. It's one person who put their arm around us who changed our lives. Yeah. And that's the leading characteristic of those people's life was love. And I think that's just a good place to start. And you're right, Jonathan. We're not going to stand up and criticize any of these big voices.
Right.
That's not our job. Maybe God put them in that spot for a reason.
Right.
Everybody thought Martin Luther King Jr. was a loudmouth.
Right.
And thank God he was who God created him to be.
Right.
Okay, so let me close with a story. All right?
Okay.
So I was running carpool, and my daughter Sterling asked, hey, can we take the dog? I said, no, we can't take the dog. Well, the dog came running out anyway, so we brought the dog. So
she had a treat in her pocket.
She was whistling.
Yeah, I know. So she's getting out of the car. And as she's getting out of the car, the dog jumps into the front seat, and her drink spills all over the car. Any guesses what that drink was?
Milk.
Wow. The worst possible
My
of
second
all
guess was
drinks.
Soda, because
what happens with milk is it becomes a science project in your car. So I come home, I'm all grumbling. My next door neighbor, not a Christian guy at all, sees me grumbling. He says, hey, I got an idea. Why don't we use air pressure? Because it's underneath the seats, and if we use the air pressure, we'll be able to blast it out. We'll get it out. So that's a great idea. So he comes over. We're doing the thing. And I was giving this message on making a point or making a difference.
Right.
And I just told him about it.
Yeah.
I just thought, hey, let's just have this conversation.
Right.
Well, he had been recruited to play baseball at a Christian school.
Okay.
And so when I told him when I was speaking, I says, oh, man, I totally know what you're talking about. And this is what he said. This is at Christian college, how he described it. People were walking around saying, don't do this, don't do that, be more like this, be more like that. Love was the last thing you felt there. Do you know what the name of the school was?
Something Christian
Grace.
University. Oh.
Oh, man.
I just think it's important that, you play that role that God has put you in.
Right.
But if you're not nurturing grace in your life, I think people will tune you out.
Yeah. I think you're right.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks.
That was fun.
All right.
See you next Tuesday.
Keep your mask on.
Love everybody from a distance. All right. We'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us for these last 10 steps. You can find the show notes for this podcast on our website, 10stepsfurther.com. If you'd like to join us for another journey, or if you know someone else who's on this walk, subscribe to our podcast at 10 Steps Further on iTunes, or simply search 10 Steps Further on your podcast app. If you'd like to be part of the conversation with a question or a comment or a criticism or even a wisecrack, join our Facebook group by simply searching 10 Steps Further. And if you're ever in San Diego, come visit us at Canyon Springs Church. We'd love to meet you.